So I've had less than 24 hours with the Nikon ZR and I can't really do a full review yet. So this is kind of like a preview. I will be doing a full review. I literally just did my first shoot today with Eden. She's an MMA fighter and I just wanted to test it in my kind of situation. So I want to put it into obviously a CrossFit situation as well. So I can really test this in a situation that, you know, I am very used to and very comfortable in. Now I did actually utilize the brand new 20-70 f2.8 Mark II lens by Nikon as well. So I don't really use zoom lenses, but I really wanted to see what it was like in that kind of situation. Obviously zoom lenses are so versatile. I'm just very used to prime lenses, but my next shoot, I'm going to be using a prime lens with the Nikon ZR. Now this camera really has a wow factor. Hands-on, sure, it's very small, it's very tiny, the grip kind of isn't comfortable, but small rig actually have this cage. Now this cage works perfectly. Obviously it's designed for the Nikon ZR. Nikon Australia did send this one to me with the cage, so I have to put the cage directly on here. So it's designed specifically for that, has a larger grip, which feels incredible. So it pairs well with that. But Nikon Australia also told me that Tilta will be doing a cage for the ZR as well. Now look, $2,200. What is Nikon doing? That is insanely cheap for this camera, $2,200 US. I mean, name a camera with these type of specs for that kind of price. You can't, because there isn't a camera with red raw codec, 6K at 60 frames per second at $2,200 US. That is insane when it comes to the price. Now, obviously having it for only 24 hours, I can't really do a full review because I just haven't had enough time. But the sensor, obviously I've had time with that particular sensor. It's a partially stacked sensor that's in the Z6 Mark III, which I do have with me as well. I think the Nikon Z6 Mark III just has one of the best values when it comes to photo and video, you know, just a hybrid camera. Now that sensor is also in the Lumix S1 Mark II, which I have had experience with as well. So the sensor and the image quality I'm kind of used to, but it's that red raw codec internal. So it has 6K resolution at 60 frames per second with that red raw codec, but not just red raw, ProRes raw, but also NRAW as well. Now, obviously, if you don't want to do any of the raw codecs, it still has H.265 as well. And on the screen right now is where you're going to be seeing some of the resolutions, which we'll go through right now. So with the H.265, which is 10-bit color, you can do 5.4K up to 60 frames per second. But if you do want to do 120 frames per second, you do go into the DX crop. And you can also get up to 240 frames per second in 1080p. Now, like I said, if you want to do NRAW, ProRes RAW, or Red RAW, you can go 6K up to 60 frames per second with that 16:9 frame. Now, all three of those RAW codecs is 12-bit RAW. Now look, coming from a predominant Sony shooter, I actually do have a Lumix camera in my lineup as well, and I've actually pre-ordered the Nikon ZR. I really, really love it that much. But one of the biggest things when it comes from being a Sony shooter and having so many Sony E-mount lenses is the Megadapt. So the Megadapt allows me to adapt all my Sony lenses, whatever I want, directly to the Nikon system with full autofocus. Now I have done a full video on this Megadapt. I think it was on the Z8 when I actually got the Z8 in. I did actually have the Z6 Mark III as well, but go check that one out if you want to see how the Megadapt works, but it works flawlessly with the Nikon ZR. And look, that's one of the biggest gripes when it comes to being a camera owner, is that you have so many different lenses that you can't actually adapt to different camera systems. But this Megadapt just allows me to put all my Sony E-mount lenses on the Nikon camera. So it makes sense for me personally to buy the Nikon ZR because it does have 6K resolution at 60 frames per second. None of the cameras I own can do that with the red raw codec. Now, one of the features that I've been waiting for a long time, I think it was early 2024 that I said that every camera should have 24-bit float internal recording. That should be a standard feature. This is the first camera that has it directly internal into the camera itself without an XLR top handle. I know the GH7 brought it in with the top handle, the XLR top handle, but if you take the XLR top handle off, you don't have 32-bit float internal recording, whereas this one with the Nikon ZR, all you need to do is attach a microphone directly into that 3.5 jack on the side, and you've got that 32-bit float internal recording. That is a massive feature for filmmakers. Now, also when it comes to the audio, they've actually done something very similar like the Sony ZV-E1, where they've got the microphone capsules on top, but you can actually change the directionality. So you can actually change it so it's very directional to the front. You can change it so it's omnidirectional, captures the audio all around, which is really interesting. I do find that's a really good feature, especially if it's only just scratch audio. But you could actually get away with, having audio just directly in there. But obviously, utilize that 32-bit float audio with a shotgun microphone. You're going to get some really good audio quality. And look, the back screen, it is huge. 4 inches. This is very similar to like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras where they have a crazy large screen on the back. This is obviously the biggest screen that I've personally got in my collection, other than obviously having an external monitor. But the good thing about this one is that you can actually just have it as is, and you don't really need an external monitor. It's big enough to see your focus. It's definitely bright enough because I actually had to turn the brightness down to be able to film my BTS, just so it wasn't overexposed when I was trying to expose for the talent as well. But it's a fantastic monitor, and I really think other camera manufacturers should be learning off Nikon when it comes to this one. Now, overheating. There is no active cooling in this thing. It's all passive cooling, so internally cooled. What's the overheating like? Now, definitely check out Matt Johnson's video. He's living in Texas. It's pretty much peak summer in Texas, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, it's crazy hot over there right now. He tested it, and he had 2 Nikon ZRs. They didn't overheat. It continuously went. It was direct sunlight. That is one of the most impressive things about this camera. And I really thought it was going to be a downside when I was in the meeting and they said it didn't have a fan. I was like, oh, wow, I hope it doesn't overheat. And it doesn't. It has survived the initial testing, which is very impressive. But definitely check out Matt Johnson's video with that one. Now, obviously, when it comes to the autofocus now, all camera manufacturers have kind of caught up to Sony. Sony are kind of like leading in the game of autofocus. But if you really dial in the autofocus in this camera, it is absolutely lightning fast. It worked perfectly fine today in that MMA shoot. I'm so happy with that. And it's kind of at the point where camera manufacturers are all just getting so similar. You really just need to find the right camera for your particular situation. So now a massive pro when it comes to this, and especially with the Canon C50 just released, that's a fantastic looking camera. But that doesn't have IBIS. Now, I know a lot of people like to use IBIS specifically in smaller bodies because you generally can have a lot of micro jitters. So you definitely need to start building them out to make sure you have really nice, smooth motion. Now, that does have, I think it's got electronic stabilization, which can kind of mitigate some of that. But this has your 7 stops of IBIS. So it actually has internal IBIS, but it's also got digital stabilization on top of that. So I know a lot of people are going to love that feature. Okay, so what are the downsides? Look, there's only one card slot. It's a CF Express Type B card, but there's also a micro SD card that you can kind of load LUTs directly into it. But hey, my Red Komodo X, when I owned that, had 1 card slot as well. There are some high-end cinema cameras that only have 1 card slot. So just make sure you have a high-quality CF Express Type B card that is definitely rated on the Nikon website. Now this one did, where is it? Now I've got this one here. This is by Nikon, so obviously if it's made by Nikon, it's going to be suiting Nikon cameras. So that's definitely a good shout there. Now secondly, ergonomically as is without the cage, I'm not a fan. It's very similar to this. My point and shoot ZV-1 Mark II. It's just got such a small handle, it feels really awkward, but I like to rig out my cameras, and definitely having a cage on here, in my opinion, is an absolute must. Because majority of the time, I'm a top handle kind of shooter. So I like to grab onto the top handle, not onto the sides. But if I am utilizing the sides, this nice extra grip with the small rig cage definitely suits. Now the last downside that I personally don't like, because I use external monitors, and that's the micro HDMI slot. Like, I really hate micro HDMI slots, and I'm not sure why they couldn't fit a full-size HDMI. I mean, I'm sure they could have made it work somehow. That would have been so nice to see that. It's not necessarily something that I would think that would stop me from buying this, and it obviously hasn't because I've already done my pre-order. It's just one of those things where I hate working with the micro HDMI, but you have to definitely use that clamp. If you do get the small rig cage, it does come with a side clamp, and definitely use that HDMI clamp, and that's not going to wreck that micro HDMI. But yeah, like I said, if you have the camera as is and you want a monitor on top, then yeah, that's going to be a thing where you're just going to have to watch. Now, one small side that I kind of don't like, it doesn't really have a D-pad on the back. It's only got that control nipple there that you kind of have on top of most cameras. Now, I'm not a fan of it. Just controlling it feels a little bit weird. It does take a little bit to get used to because I haven't had a camera that kind of has that as its main control. But once I get used to it, it'll be perfectly fine. It's just at the moment, it feels just a little bit weird and a little bit annoying to kind of, you know, toggle through. Like I said, you just have to get used to the ergonomics of that and it will be perfectly fine. But the first 24 hours, just my first experience with this, not a fan, but I definitely will get used to it. Now look, overall, my initial impressions, I personally love this. Coming from a Sony guy, I really love this. And like I said, I've already put my pre-order. I'm getting one. I really like this camera. I love the ergonomics, and I just love the ability that I can actually utilize my Sony lenses directly on here. But I am definitely going to be doing a full review of this camera, really deep dive into my workflow, into, you know, hardcore video shooting. Obviously, I have done a couple of stills, and you saw that in this video. Like, it's not designed for a stills camera, but it still can take stills, which is great because, you know, sometimes we do need to take some stills. But overall, I love it. There are a couple of downsides. No camera so far is perfect, and I don't think no camera is going to be perfect. That's why I've got a whole bunch of different cameras to suit a whole bunch of different situations. It's just a tool at the end of the day, but I think the price is the biggest one, $2,200 US. I mean, you can't say no to that. That's pretty incredible for the pricing, but thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one. Let's get it.